The day I realized my wife had been lying to me for years, hiding millions right under my nose, was the day I stopped believing I was in control of anything. I used to believe I was the smartest man in the room. My friends admired me, my business partners respected me, and my family relied on me. At least that's what I told myself every single day. I was the provider, the decision-maker, the one pulling all the strings. And at the center of my empire stood my wife, a woman I considered fragile, dependent, and completely under my control. People often said, "You're lucky to have such a loyal wife." I would smirk and respond, "Of course she's loyal. She can't survive without me." Those weren't just words I threw around, I genuinely believed them. In my eyes, she was sheltered, naive, and financially helpless. I managed everything. Our accounts, our investments, our property, even the weekly grocery list. She only had one job: keep the house clean, look good when I needed her by my side, and stay silent when I made decisions. And the truth is, she played the part perfectly. She rarely questioned me, never argued about money, and always nodded in agreement when I told her what we were going to do. Sometimes my friends would joke that I'd trained her well. I laughed along, secretly proud of the way I had built this perfect illusion of power. My arrogance went so far that I started to parade it in front of others. At dinner parties, I'd casually drop comments like, "She doesn't even know how much money we have." Why would she? That's my department. My wife would just smile politely, never correcting me, never embarrassing me, and I loved it. To me, her silence was proof of her dependence. I thought I had everything under control. I thought I was untouchable. But life has a strange way of humbling you. Looking back now, I realize that silence is not always submission. Sometimes silence is strategy. And while I was busy congratulating myself on being the man of the house, my wife was quietly building something I couldn't even imagine. The day I discovered her secret was the day my world collapsed. That moment I understood the bitter truth. The woman I had called weak was playing a game I didn't even know existed. And I, the self-proclaimed master of control, was nothing but her pawn. From the outside, our life looked perfect. A beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, expensive cars in the driveway, lavish vacations every summer, and a reputation that made people envy us. I loved walking into a room with my wife on my arm, not because I adored her, but because she made me look good. She was elegant, graceful, and, at least in my mind, completely mine. At home, I ran everything. I decided when we would eat out, which bills got paid, which relatives were worth our time and which weren't. If she ever tried to suggest something, I brushed it off with a laugh or a sarcastic remark. She quickly learned to stop making suggestions altogether. To me, that was proof that I had her exactly where I wanted her: silent, obedient, dependent. When my friends visited, they would point out how polite and quiet she was. "Man, your wife is different," one of them once said. "Most women argue, but yours just agrees with you." I smirked, sipping my drink, and replied, "That's because she knows her place." Everyone laughed, and I felt powerful, proud, untouchable. I used to tell people that my wife didn't even know the passwords to our bank accounts. "Why would she?" I'd say smugly. "Finances are complicated, she wouldn't understand." And she never challenged me, not once. If a bill came in, she'd quietly hand it to me. If we were shopping, she'd wait for me to swipe the card. She never questioned a thing. At night, when I looked at her sitting quietly on the couch, scrolling through her phone or reading a book, I felt almost sorry for her. I thought she had no ambitions, no goals, no identity beyond me. I believed I was her entire world. What I didn't realize was that she was letting me believe exactly that. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was patience. Her obedience wasn't submission, it was strategy. Every time she smiled at my arrogance, every time she nodded along to my self-absorbed rants, she was building the perfect illusion. And I fell for it completely. I strutted around like a king, blind to the truth that my so-called queen wasn't waiting for me to protect her. She was quietly building her own empire behind the walls of my castle. But back then, I didn't see it. All I saw was a loyal wife who couldn't breathe without me. If only I had looked closer. If only I had asked myself why she never complained, why she never fought, why she always seemed so calm. Because people who are planning revenge don't waste their energy arguing. They wait, and she was waiting for the perfect moment. Control. That was the word I lived by. I controlled what food was cooked in the house, what color curtains we hung, even what brand of detergent my wife used for the laundry. It sounds ridiculous now, but back then, it gave me a sense of power. If she wanted to buy a new dress, she had to ask me first. If she wanted to visit her parents, she had to check with my schedule. And if she wanted to spend money, she had to justify why. I told myself it was responsibility. I was the breadwinner after all. Didn't that give me the right to control how the money was spent? That was the story I told everyone, and myself. But the truth is, I enjoyed watching her depend on me for every little thing. I remember one evening, she asked if she could buy a new handbag. I looked at her and laughed. You don't need another bag. What for? You hardly go anywhere. She just smiled softly and nodded, as if I was right. That smile, I didn't realize it at the time, but it wasn't agreement. It was something else, something I was too arrogant to recognize. Vacations. I chose the destination, family dinners. I chose who we would invite. Even when she cooked, I had to approve the menu. My friends admired how much discipline I had over my wife. You're lucky, man, they'd say. Most women nowadays don't listen, yours does. I would puff up with pride, not realizing they were praising a mask she wore just for me. And the strangest thing? She never argued, not once. Other wives fought back, stood up for themselves, demanded equality. Mine? She just agreed. At times, it felt too easy, almost unnatural. But instead of questioning it, I celebrated it. I thought I had unlocked some secret formula to marriage. One night during dinner with friends, I even said it out loud. My wife wouldn't last a week without me. She doesn't even know how to pay the bills. Everyone laughed, including her. She sat there with that calm, unreadable smile, as if my words meant nothing. I didn't know it then, but every insult I threw her way was just another piece of fuel she stored for later. Looking back now, I can see the cracks I ignored. Sometimes I'd find her scribbling in a notebook when she thought I wasn't looking. Sometimes she'd close her laptop quickly when I walked into the room. Once, I even saw her slip an envelope into her bag before I could notice. But I brushed it off every single time. She's probably just writing recipes, I told myself. Or maybe she's planning a surprise for me. Surprise. That word still haunts me, because the surprise she was planning wasn't for my birthday or for our anniversary. It was for my downfall, and I walked right into it with a smile on my face. Every empire starts to crumble with the smallest of cracks. Mine came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I came home earlier than usual, briefcase in hand, ready to announce that I'd closed another deal that would make us even richer. I expected my wife to greet me at the door like always, smiling, soft-spoken, ready to listen to my stories of triumph. Instead, I walked into the living room and found her at the dining table, surrounded by papers. She jumped slightly when she saw me, quickly stacking the papers together. It wasn't unusual. Wives have recipes, shopping lists, maybe letters, from family. But there was something about the way she moved, too swift, too deliberate, as if she didn't want me to see. "What's that?" I asked, casually setting my briefcase down. "Just some notes," she replied, smiling faintly. Her voice was calm, but her hands betrayed her. They trembled ever so slightly as she tucked the papers into a folder. I narrowed my eyes. For a second, I almost pressed her. Almost. But then my ego came to the rescue. I told myself, she's harmless. What could she possibly be hiding? I laughed, kissed her on the forehead, and said, "Don't work too hard. That little head of yours wasn't made for numbers." She just smiled again. That same unreadable, patient smile. A week later, another odd moment. I opened the mailbox and found an envelope addressed to her. The sender. A bank I didn't recognize. I frowned, tore it open without thinking, only to find a generic notice about an account update. For a second, my stomach twisted. An account in her name. But I brushed it off. Probably some old account from before our marriage, I reasoned. Maybe even a mistake. Besides, if she really had money tucked away, I would know. I knew everything. Or so I thought. One night, while she was showering, I passed by her laptop on the counter. It was open, the screen glowing. As I leaned closer, the screen suddenly locked itself. Password protected. My wife had never kept anything private from me before. At least that's what I believed. I stared at the black screen for a moment, my reflection staring back at me. I should have asked questions then. I should have dug deeper. But instead, I scoffed. She probably just doesn't want me to mess up her online shopping cart. Every red flag, every warning sign, I dismissed. My pride wouldn't let me consider that she might be more than the obedient wife I thought she was. I had built this illusion of control, and I clung to it like a lifeline, but illusions never last forever. That rainy Thursday, that strange bank letter, that locked laptop, they weren't accidents. They were the first tiny cracks in the wall I had built around myself, and had I paid attention, I would have seen what was coming. I would have prepared myself for the storm she was carefully, quietly, patiently planning. Instead, I ignored it, and because of that, the storm hit harder than I ever imagined. They say marriages don't fall apart overnight. They fracture, slowly in ways you barely notice, until one day the damage is too big to ignore. At that time, I thought my marriage was solid, perfect even. But looking back, the cracks were everywhere. It started with the way she stopped asking for my permission. For years, if she wanted a new dress, she'd ask me. If she wanted to visit her parents, she'd check with my schedule. But slowly, she stopped. I'd come home and notice a new piece of clothing in her closet, or a fresh set of dishes in the kitchen, and when I asked, she'd simply smile and say, "Oh, I just picked it up today." At first, I brushed it off. She's getting comfortable, that's all, but inside it bothered me. I had always been the gatekeeper, the one who controlled every detail. And now she was making decisions without me. Small ones, sure, but small. Cracks become big fractures. Then there were the late nights. My wife had always gone to bed early. She was the type to be asleep by 10 while I stayed up watching TV or finishing a glass of scotch. But suddenly, she started staying up later than me. I'd fall asleep, and when I woke up in the middle of the night, I'd find her in the study with the light on, typing on her laptop or scribbling in that same little notebook. When I asked her about it, she'd say, "Just reading." I accepted. That because why wouldn't I? She wasn't smart enough to be doing anything important. At least that's what I told myself. One evening I came home and found her on the phone. She lowered her voice when I entered, then quickly hung up. "Who was that?" I asked. She smiled and said, "Just a friend." But she didn't tell me who. My wife had never kept friends outside of the few I approved of, and she certainly never had secret conversations. That night, something in me twisted. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something different about her. She wasn't the meek, obedient wife I had built up in my head. She was something else. But here's the thing about pride. It blinds you. Even as I saw the signs, I convinced myself they meant nothing. I told myself, she's harmless, she could never betray me, she wouldn't dare. So I ignored the late-night calls, I ignored the new purchases, I ignored the way she smiled at me, calm, confident, almost as if she knew something I didn't. I thought I was still in control, but the truth? She was already rewriting the rules of our marriage, and I was too arrogant to notice. The more I convinced myself that I was in control, the more reckless I became. I started spending less time at home, claiming business meetings and late nights at the office. In reality, I was spending those evenings with someone else, a woman who made me feel powerful, admired, wanted. Unlike my wife, she laughed at all my jokes, clung to me like I was her entire world, and made me feel like the man I believed myself to be. My mistress was young, ambitious, and impressed by the money I threw around. With her, I didn't have to pretend to be humble. I could brag about my wealth, my status, my perfect marriage, and she ate it up. She made me feel like a king and my wife. She didn't ask questions. Not once. That was the strangest part. Most wives would grow suspicious if their husbands started coming home late or smelling of perfume that wasn't theirs. But mine? She never complained. She never fought. She never even raised an eyebrow. Instead, she greeted me with the same calm smile, served dinner as usual and carried on with her quiet routines. At first I thought it was proof of her ignorance. She's too naive to notice, I told myself. But then, as the weeks passed, her calmness began to bother me. It wasn't the calmness of a clueless woman. It was something else, something deeper. One night I walked into the kitchen late, expecting to find her asleep. Instead, she was sipping tea, her face illuminated by the dim light above the stove. She looked up at me, her eyes calm, steady, almost knowing. "You're home late," she said softly. "Yes." "Work," I replied quickly. She nodded, took another sip of her tea and simply said, "Of course." No argument, no suspicion, just those two words, spoken with a calmness that made my chest tighten. That moment unsettled me. It was as if she was playing along with my lies, letting me dig my own grave while she sat there, quietly watching. But my arrogance won again. She's harmless, I thought. She wouldn't dare cross me. She can't survive without me. In fact, her silence gave me confidence. I started flaunting my new lifestyle more boldly, buying gifts for my mistress, spending money recklessly, and bragging to my friends that I had the perfect setup. A wife who doesn't question me, and a mistress who adores me, I laughed one night over drinks. What more could a man want? If only I had known that my wife wasn't ignoring my behavior. She was documenting it. She wasn't blind to my lies. She was collecting them piece by piece, turning them into a weapon I couldn't even imagine. But in my arrogance, I mistook her silence for weakness. And by the time I realized the truth, it was far too late. The deeper I sank into my affair, the more I began to imagine a life without my wife. At first, it was just a passing thought, a what-if, but soon it grew into a plan. My mistress whispered in my ear about how much better life would be if I didn't have to sneak around. She told me I deserved someone who adored me openly, who hung on to my every word, who didn't sit across from me at dinner with that calm, unreadable smile. And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Why should I stay shackled to a woman who no longer worshipped me? She didn't argue, true, but she also didn't cling to me like she used to. She didn't look at me with awe anymore. She looked at me like she knew something, like she saw through me. So I started planning. I didn't want a messy divorce. I wanted control, like always. The house, the cars, the accounts, they were all in my name anyway. Or so I thought. I figured I could cut her off with a modest settlement, enough to keep her quiet, but not enough to damage me. I rehearsed the speech in my head countless times. "It's over. You'll be taken care of, but I'm moving on." Clean, simple, authoritative. But every time I looked at her sitting calmly at the table or quietly folding laundry, I hesitated. Something about her composure unnerved me. Most women would cry, yell demand answers. Mine. She just carried on, unaffected. It was as if she was waiting for me to say the words she already knew were coming. One night, while lying beside her, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about how I would break the news. She rolled over and whispered, "You're restless tonight." I froze. "Just work on my mind," I lied. She hummed softly, almost like she didn't believe me, and drifted back to sleep. Meanwhile, I lay awake, my heart pounding, not from guilt, but from confusion. Why wasn't she fighting for me? Why wasn't she clinging to the life I gave her? The next day, I mentioned the idea of divorce to a close friend, laughing as if it were a joke. He frowned and said, "Careful, women always know more than they let on." I waved him off. "Not my wife. She's different, she's dependent. She has nothing without me." But deep down, a sliver of doubt crept in. Her calmness wasn't weakness. It was something else, something I couldn't name. Still, I convinced myself I had the upper hand. I began discreetly meeting with a lawyer, asking about divorce proceedings, property division, custody. Even though we had no children, I wanted to know every angle. The lawyer assured me it would be straightforward, and yet when I returned home that evening, my wife was waiting at the table, sipping tea, her gaze steady as always. She smiled at me and said, "Long day." Her voice was calm, steady, unshakable, and For the first time in my life, I wondered if I was the one being controlled. I had delayed it long enough. For weeks I'd lived in limbo, half at home, half in the arms of my mistress. Every day, my wife's calm presence gnawed at me, and every night, my mistress's voice grew louder in my ear. She's holding you back. You deserve more. Start fresh with me. Finally, I decided. It was time to end it. I rehearsed the words in my head as I drove home one evening. We're done. I'll make sure you're taken care of, but I can't live this lie anymore. In my mind it was clean, swift, final. She'd cry, maybe beg a little, but eventually she'd accept reality. After all, what choice did she have? But when I walked through the front door, she was already sitting at the dining table, waiting. The air felt different that night, thick, heavy, almost like she knew what was coming. "Dinner's ready," she said softly, her eyes never leaving mine. I sat down across from her, my chest tightening. For a moment I almost lost my nerve, but I reminded myself I was in control. I always had been. Between bites of food, I cleared my throat and began. "There's something we need to talk about." She placed her fork down gently, folded her hands and nodded. I thought so. Her calmness rattled me. I'd expected shock, tears, maybe even anger, but she looked almost prepared. I pressed on. "I don't think this marriage is working anymore. I've given it a lot of thought, and I think it's best if we end things. Of course, I'll make sure you're provided for. You won't be left with nothing." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Not sad, not broken, just knowing. "Provided for," she repeated, her voice smooth. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'll be fair. You'll be comfortable." She tilted her head slightly, studying me, like I was the one under a microscope. Then she said something that froze me in place. Comfortable is such a relative word, isn't it? I stared at her, thrown off balance. "What do you mean?" But she didn't explain. Instead, she simply picked up her fork again and continued eating as if nothing had happened. The rest of the meal was silent. My words, my decision, hung in the air between us, but she never reacted the way I expected. No breakdown, no pleading, just that unsettling calm. When I finally pushed my chair back and stood up, she looked at me one last time and said, "You're right. Things are about to change." Her tone wasn't defeated, it wasn't even sad, it was steady, confident, almost triumphant. For the first time, a flicker of unease crept into me. I had declared the end of our marriage, certain I was in control. But the way she looked at me that night, the way her words lingered, made me realize something terrifying. Maybe she had been waiting for this moment. Maybe I wasn't the one ending things, maybe she was. The morning after I told her about the divorce, I woke up expecting tension. Maybe cold silence, maybe angry tears, maybe accusations. Instead, she greeted me with the same calm smile as always, made me coffee, and kissed me on the cheek before I left for work. It unnerved me more than any screaming match could have. At the office, I bragged to my mistress that I had finally done it. She squealed with delight, talking about how we could soon live together without secrecy. I soaked in her admiration, but somewhere in the back of my mind, my wife's quiet smile lingered. That night, when I returned home, I found her in the study with a stack of papers neatly arranged on the desk. She looked up at me and said, "We need to talk." I frowned. "About what?" "About the divorce," she said plainly. "I think it's a good idea. I've been preparing for this for a long time." Her words hit me with a slap. "Preparing? For a long time?" Before I could respond, she slid a folder across the desk. Inside were copies of bank statements, property records, and legal documents. My name was on some, but most were in hers. Accounts I didn't know existed. Properties I'd never heard of. Investments I had no clue she had. I started. "What is this?" I demanded. She leaned back, her eyes steady. "My accounts, my assets, my security." I stared at the numbers, the balances. They weren't small. We were talking about hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, spread across multiple banks. This isn't possible," I stammered. You don't even handle the money, I do. Her smile widened just slightly. That's what you always believed, and I let you believe it. The room spun around me. For years, I had flaunted control, mocked her dependence, treated her as though she couldn't survive without me. Yet here she was, calmly revealing that she had built an empire of her own right under my nose. I slammed the folder shut. How did you do this? She didn't flinch. While you were busy showing off, I was paying attention. Every deal you bragged about, every account you mentioned, every careless detail you dropped at dinner parties. I listened, and I built something of my own. Her voice was steady, sharp, cutting through me like a blade. That night, for the first time, I realized the truth. I wasn't divorcing a helpless woman. I was divorcing someone who had been planning for this moment longer than I had. And suddenly, I wasn't the predator anymore. I was the prey. I barely slept that night. The folder of documents haunted me. Every number, every property deed, every hidden account that I had somehow missed. My wife had built a financial world I didn't even know existed. By morning, my chest was tight with panic. I needed answers. So I called my lawyer. We met in his office and I dropped the folder on his desk. Tell me this is fake, I demanded. Tell me she can't possibly own all of this. He leafed through the papers slowly, carefully, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. Finally, he looked up at me and said the one thing I didn't want to hear. These look legitimate. My stomach turned. But how? I control everything. The accounts, the property, everything is under my name. He gave me a look I didn't appreciate. Apparently not. These documents show her name. And if she's had them prepared this way, it means she's been planning for a scenario like this for a long time. I gripped the arm of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. She tricked me. She's been hiding this. Not hiding, the lawyer corrected. Securing. There's a difference. And if you move forward with this divorce, she's not the one who's going to come out broken. You are. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You don't understand. She can't survive without me. She doesn't know how to live independently. The lawyer's expression hardened. From where I'm sitting, it looks like she knows exactly how to survive. In fact, she may have positioned herself to take even more from you. If she can prove infidelity, she has leverage. If she can prove reckless spending, she has leverage. If she has documentation, which, based on this folder, I'd say she does, you're not walking away with the upper hand. I felt the blood drain from my face. Infidelity. My mistress. My wife had never confronted me about her, never even hinted that she knew. But what if she did? What if she had proof? The lawyer sighed and closed the folder. My advice? Be careful. Very careful. This isn't going to be the clean break you imagined. Your wife, she's dangerous. Dangerous. The word echoed in my ears. I had spent years underestimating her, mocking her, treating her like she was nothing without me. And now the idea that she might have been steps ahead of me all along. It made my chest tighten with dread. I walked out of the lawyer's office feeling smaller than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I was the one ending this marriage, or if I was just playing into her hands. After leaving my lawyer's office, I drove straight to my mistress's apartment. My chest was burning, my head pounding with rage and fear. I needed comfort, reassurance, something to remind me that I still had control somewhere in my life. She opened the door with a bright smile, throwing her arms around me. Finally, she said, kissing my neck. Did you tell her? Is it done? I pushed past her and dropped onto the couch, my hands shaking. It's not that simple, her smile faltered. What do you mean? You said everything was in your name. You said it would be easy, I snapped. I thought it was, but apparently my wife has her own accounts, properties, investments. She's been preparing for this divorce longer than I've even thought about it. The mistress blinked, her excitement dimming into unease. So she has money. More than I imagined, I muttered. Enough to make this divorce dangerous for me. She sat down beside me, her hand sliding onto my arm. Well, you'll still be fine, right? You're successful. You'll come out on top. Her words sounded hollow, forced. For the first time, I noticed the flicker of calculation in her eyes. My mistress wasn't here for love, she was here for the lifestyle. The money, the power. And if I lost those things, the thought made me sick. I stood up abruptly. I need to figure this out. She can't win. She's not smarter than me. The mistress hesitated, then asked a question that chilled me. Are you sure she doesn't know about us? I froze. For months I had assumed my wife was blind to my affair. She never questioned my late nights, never commented on the perfume, never once accused me. But now, after seeing those documents, after hearing my lawyer's warning, I couldn't be so sure. What if she knew all along? What if she had evidence? I rubbed my temples, my thoughts spiraling. If she does know, she hasn't used it yet, which means she's waiting for the perfect moment to destroy me. The mistress fell silent, and I could feel her confidence in me slipping. I looked at her and saw the truth I had been avoiding. She wasn't my escape. She wasn't going to save me. She was just another problem waiting to collapse if my world came crashing down. For the first time, I left her apartment without kissing her goodbye. As I drove home, the streets blurred past me, my knuckles white, on the steering wheel. My wife's calm smile flashed in my mind, her steady voice, her quiet words. Things are about to change. And I finally admitted something I had never thought possible. She wasn't reacting because she didn't need to. She was already winning. When I pulled into the driveway that night, my chest felt like it was caving in. The glow of the house lights, usually a sign of comfort, looked menacing. My wife's car sat neatly in its spot, waiting as if mocking me. I walked inside, half expecting the usual routine. Her smile, her calm voice, dinner waiting on the table. But tonight was different. The house was quiet, almost unnervingly so. Then I saw her. She was sitting in the living room, a folder on the coffee table in front of her. Not the same folder of bank statements. This was thinner, but somehow more dangerous. Long day? She asked, her voice steady as always. Yeah, I muttered, loosening my tie. Work? Her eyes flicked to the folder. Funny, because I think you've been working somewhere else. My heart skipped. What's that supposed to mean? Without a word, she slid the folder toward me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough. Me, with her, my mistress, at restaurants, leaving her apartment, even one of us holding hands in broad daylight. My throat went dry. Where did you... She cut me off, her voice calm but razor sharp. You've always underestimated me. You thought I didn't see, you thought I didn't hear, but I don't need to yell to know the truth. I collect facts, evidence, proof. I gripped the edge of the folder, my mind racing. This doesn't mean anything. These could be... She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. They mean everything. In court, they mean leverage. They mean credibility. They mean you lose. For the first time, I saw no hint of weakness in her. No naivety. No dependence, only power, quiet, controlled, devastating power. You think I'll let you walk away and leave me scraps? She continued. No, I'll take what's mine. And I'll take it in a way that destroys you. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Because deep down, I knew she was right. The silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Then she stood, gathering the folder back into her hands. Get some rest, she said softly, almost mockingly. Tomorrow will be... interesting. And just like that, she walked upstairs, leaving me frozen on the couch, staring at the evidence of my own downfall. For years I had believed I was the master of the game, but tonight I realized the truth. The game had never been mine. It was hers all along. The weeks leading up to the divorce hearing were a blur of panic. My mistress grew distant, my lawyer grew colder, and my wife grew stronger. Every time I saw her, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that twisted my gut. I told myself it didn't matter. I still had resources, connections, charm. Judges respected men like me. My wife, with her soft voice and delicate frame, would never stand a chance against me in court. At least, that's what I believed. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom wearing my best suit, head held high, forcing a smile. My lawyer whispered that we'd keep things clean, quick. A modest settlement, maybe some alimony, and I'd be free to start my new life. But the moment I saw my wife sitting at the plaintiff's table, I knew something was wrong. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't timid. She was poised, collected, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Beside her sat a lawyer I didn't recognize, young, sharp-eyed, and brimming with confidence. The proceedings began. My lawyer made his opening statement, painting me as the provider, the man who had carried the weight of our marriage. He described my wife as dependent, fragile, unable to manage on her own, and then her lawyer stood. "Your Honor," he began, sliding a stack of documents across the table, "the defense's portrayal of my client is inaccurate. Over the course of this marriage, my client has built and maintained independent financial accounts, investments, and properties, all legally documented and verifiable. In addition, she has collected extensive evidence of her husband's infidelity and reckless spending." My heart slammed against my ribs. The judge raised an eyebrow, flipping through the documents. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice stern. I stammered, I'm not aware of any—" Before I could finish, her lawyer laid down another folder. Inside were the photographs of me and my mistress, time-stamped, dated, undeniable. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. My face burned. "Your Honor," her lawyer continued, "we're not only asking for a divorce, we're requesting full ownership of the marital home, a significant share of the business assets, and damages for emotional distress caused by blatant infidelity." I turned to my lawyer in disbelief. He whispered harshly, "She's destroying you. She has everything." I looked at my wife. She met my gaze, calm and steady, just as she had at the dinner table weeks ago. No gloating, no anger, just certainty. In that moment I understood. This wasn't a negotiation. This was an execution. She hadn't just prepared for divorce. She had prepared to annihilate me. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as the judge flipped through the stack of evidence. Every page he turned was like another nail being hammered into my coffin. Finally, he looked up, his expression hard. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice firm and steady, "the evidence presented here paints a very clear picture. You not only failed in your duties as a husband, but you deliberately deceived your spouse, engaged in infidelity, and attempted to conceal assets." My throat tightened. "Your Honor, that's not—" "Silence," the judge snapped. "I will not have this courtroom turned into a performance." The humiliation burned hotter than fire. I had walked in expecting to dominate, to walk away with control. Instead, I was being reduced to a liar, a cheater, a fool. In front of strangers, in front of my wife, in front of the law, the judge continued. "So therefore this court awards the marital home and 50% of the business assets to Mrs. Thompson. Additionally, Mr. Thompson will provide ongoing financial support in the form of alimony, given the documented evidence of reckless spending and infidelity." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. Half my business, the house, alimony. I turned to my lawyer, desperate. "Do something," I hissed. He shook his head, defeated. "There's nothing to do. She's covered every angle." Across the courtroom, my wife remained calm, her hands folded, her face serene. She didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. She had won. The judge banged the gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." As the room emptied, I sat frozen in my chair, my mind spinning. My reputation, my wealth, my pride, it was all slipping through my fingers. People who once respected me would hear about this. My friends, my colleagues, even my mistress, especially my mistress. I glanced at my wife one last time. She rose from her seat gracefully, gathering her papers. Before leaving, she turned to me and said softly, so only I could hear, "I told you, things were about to change." And then she walked out, leaving me broken in the very place I had thought I would prove my power. The predator was gone. All that was left was prey. I stumbled out of the courthouse like a man being dragged to the gallows. My suit felt heavier, my tie like a noose choking the life out of me. People's eyes followed me, whispers, smirks, judgment. I had never been humiliated like this before. There was only one place left to go. One person who I thought would still stand by me, my mistress. I drove to her apartment with trembling hands, rehearsing excuses in my head. She doesn't need to know everything. I'll tell her it's temporary. I'll rebuild. She just needs to stay by my side. When she opened the door, I tried to smile. "Rough day," I said, forcing a laugh. But her expression was cold, wary. She didn't kiss me, didn't pull me inside. Instead, she folded her arms. "I heard about court." My blood ran cold. "How?" She raised an eyebrow. "News spreads fast when people like you fall, and apparently you've fallen hard." I swallowed. "It's just a setback. I still have money, connections, I can fix this." She tilted her head, studying me like I was a stranger. "Can you? Because from what I've heard, your wife walked away with the house, the assets, even alimony. Sounds like you're not the man you made yourself out to be." Her words sliced deeper than the judge's verdict. I reached for her arm, desperate. "Don't say that. I did all of this for us. You know that." She pulled back, her eyes narrowing. "No. You did it for yourself. You lied to her and you lied to me. You told me you were untouchable, that you had everything under control. But look at you now, you're nothing but a sinking ship." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "You can't just leave after everything." She cut me off with a bitter laugh. "Watch me." And then she shut the door in my face. I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding, staring at the peeling paint of her apartment door. For months, she had been my escape, my secret weapon, my proof that I was still powerful. But now, just like my wife, she had seen the truth. I wasn't powerful. I was pathetic. And I was completely, utterly alone. When I finally dragged myself back home, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. The walls seemed colder, the silence heavier. Every step echoed like I was walking through someone else's life. I expected my wife to be gone, already moved into her new world, leaving me to rot in mine. But she was there, sitting in the kitchen, sipping tea as calmly as if nothing had happened. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "Rough day?" I wanted to scream, to smash something, to demand how she could sit there so calmly while I burned from the inside out. Instead, all I managed was a hoarse, "You've ruined me?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "No, you ruined yourself. I just showed the world." I slammed my fist on the counter. "Don't act like you're innocent in this. You planned it. Every move, every document, every photo. How long were you preparing this?" She set down her cup gently. "Long enough to know that when the time came, you wouldn't see it coming." Her calmness was unbearable. "So that's it then? You've taken the house, the business, the money, you've humiliated me in court. What more do you want?" She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto mine with terrifying precision. "The truth." My chest tightened. "What truth?" She opened a drawer and pulled out another folder, thinner than the others, but somehow more dangerous. She slid it across the table. Inside were printed emails. My emails. To my mistress. To others. Plans I thought I'd buried. Lies I thought I'd erased. Proof of every betrayal I'd ever committed. I froze. "How did you—" Her voice cut through like ice. "You always thought you were hiding, but you never realized who paid the bills for the internet. Who had access to the accounts, who quietly backed up every message you thought you deleted." I stared at her, horror creeping up my spine. She stood, her voice steady, final. "This isn't about money anymore. It's about making sure you never get to rewrite the story. You wanted to control everything. Now you'll live with the reality that you control nothing. Not me, not your reputation, not even your own narrative." I felt my knees weaken. For years I had believed I was the architect of our marriage, the master of my fate. But in that moment, staring at her calm, relentless gaze, I realized the most devastating truth of all. The story was never mine. It was hers from the very beginning, and she had just written the ending. The day the divorce was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse with nothing but a hollow victory smile plastered on my face. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered, and people stared. Not at me with admiration anymore, but with pity, or worse, the amusement. By the time I got back to what was left of my life, reality had sunk in. The house, hers, the cars, split, the business, halved and bleeding without her quiet management. Even the accounts I thought I had hidden were now under court order. I moved into a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper and a view of a parking lot. The once king of the household, the man who strutted around claiming he had everything under control, was now sitting on a second-hand couch, staring at blank walls. And the silence. The silence was unbearable. No wife humming in the kitchen, no steady routine. Just me, my thoughts, and the crushing weight of everything I had lost. I reached for my phone out of habit, scrolling through contacts. My mistress's name stared back at me. I thought about calling her, begging for some kind of comfort, but I knew the truth. She was long gone. Probably with someone who could actually provide what I no longer could. The business calls slowed. Friends stopped inviting me out. It was as if my humiliation had spread like wildfire, and no one wanted to stand too close to the flames. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every smug word I'd ever said to my wife. I'm the provider. You'd be nothing without me. You're lucky to have me. How wrong I had been. She hadn't just survived without me, she had thrived, and I was the one left gasping for air in the ruins. One evening I poured myself a drink, staring into the amber liquid like it might hold the answers, but all it reflected was a man I barely recognized, tired, broken, stripped of the crown he thought he wore. For the first time in my life, I admitted it to myself. She had beaten me, not in anger, not in violence, but with patience, with silence, with intelligence I never gave her credit for, and that realization hurt more than losing everything else, because it meant I had never been in control, not once. Weeks turned into months. My days blurred together. Wake up in a shoebox apartment, go through the motions at work, come home to silence. My reflection in the mirror grew older, more tired. The spark that once fueled me was gone. And then one afternoon, fate twisted the knife. Was walking through the city, head down, when I saw her. My ex-wife. She was standing outside a cafe laughing with a group of colleagues. Her posture was confident, her eyes bright. There was a glow about her I hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. She looked free. She looked powerful, and worse, she looked happy. I froze on the sidewalk, hidden among the crowd. Watching her, I felt an ache in my chest that no court order could compare to. She wasn't struggling. She wasn't broken. She wasn't the fragile, dependent woman I had convinced myself she was. She was thriving, without me. I heard snippets of her conversation as I lingered nearby. Words about investments, projects, expansion. She was building something new, something bigger. Her quiet intelligence, the same intelligence I had dismissed, was now on full display for the world to see. One of her colleagues touched her arm as they laughed, and jealousy twisted in my gut. I wanted to storm over, to remind everyone she used to be mine. But even I knew the truth. She wasn't mine anymore. She never really had been. As she turned to head inside the cafe, her eyes brushed over me for the briefest moment. I don't know if she recognized me in that instant, a broken shadow of the man she once lived with. But if she did, she gave no sign, no smirk, no glare, no acknowledgement at all. She simply walked past, her heels clicking confidently on the pavement, while I stood rooted to the spot, invisible. That was the real punishment. Not the lost house, not the drained accounts, not even the mistress slamming her door in my face. The real punishment was watching her succeed, knowing she didn't need me, knowing she had written her own story and erased me from it. For years I had told her she would be nothing without me. But standing there on that crowded street, I finally understood the truth. I was nothing without her. After that day on the street, I couldn't get her image out of my head. The way she laughed, the glow in her face, the confidence in her step, it haunted me. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice in my head. Not the calm threats, not the courtroom words, just the little things she used. To say at dinner, in the mornings, in those quiet moments I'd brushed aside, and every memory cut deeper because I knew I had thrown it all away. The regret was relentless. I stopped eating properly. Meals were reduced to half-finished takeout boxes and bitter cups of coffee. My clothes grew looser, my reflection in the mirror gaunter. Dark circles carved themselves under my eyes. Work became unbearable. I used to walk into the office with authority, people standing when I entered the room. Now they barely glanced at me. Whispers followed me down the hallways. That's him, the one whose wife cleaned him out. My employees respected her more than me, even in her absence. I started drinking more at night, hoping to blur the edges of reality, but it only sharpened the pain. The alcohol brought dreams. Dreams of her, dreams where she was still beside. Me, where I hadn't made every mistake possible. But morning always came, cruel and unforgiving, and I woke up alone in that suffocating apartment. My health deteriorated. Headaches, a constant heaviness in my chest. Sometimes in the quietest hours of the night, I wondered if my body was giving up just as fast as my mind had. I told myself I should move on, find someone new, start over. But the truth was, no one could fill that void. No one could erase the look in her eyes when she told me, "You thought you controlled everything, but you never did." Those words had become my curse, and the irony, the cruel final irony, was that I had spent years believing she couldn't live without me. But here I was, crumbling, proving that I couldn't live without her. Every day felt like another sentence in a prison I had built with my own arrogance, and I knew this was only the beginning of my punishment. Months had passed, yet the sting of it all never dulled. Every morning I woke up in that small, lifeless apartment, and every night I fell asleep knowing my life wasn't mine anymore. I used to think punishment was something handed down by others, by a judge, by a spouse, by society. But now I understood the truth. The worst punishment is the one you carry inside your own chest. Regret, shame, the knowledge that everything you've lost was destroyed by your own hands. One evening, as I walked past the old neighborhood, I saw her again, my ex-wife. She was standing at the front gate of our former house. No, her house now. A child from the neighborhood ran up to her, handing her flowers, and she smiled. That same calm, radiant smile that used to make me feel like I was king of the world. But now that smile wasn't mine to claim. It never had been. I wanted to walk up, to apologize, to beg. But I didn't, because deep down I knew it wouldn't matter. She had built her world without me, and she was thriving in it. And me? I was nothing more than a cautionary tale. I turned away, the weight of it all crushing me, and I realized something that made my chest ache. The greatest revenge isn't loud, it isn't violent, it isn't messy. The greatest revenge is silent. It's success. It's smiling while the one who underestimated you crumbles alone, and she had mastered that art. As I walked away for the last time, I whispered to myself the truth I had spent years denying. She won. She always won. What do you think? Did the wife go too far, or was this the justice she deserved? If you were in her place, would you have done the same or something even harsher? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like the video if the story gave you chills. Subscribe for more unbelievable real-life revenge stories. You won't want to miss the next one.